and welcome to the Money-tonic Casino. Today I'm going to teach you how to play Texas Hold'em. This is an extremely popular game, and it's definitely worth giving a shot at the casino if you've never played. This video is meant to help you if you don't know the rules or you've been nervous about trying it at the casino. I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know to get started. Texas Hold'em is an extremely simple game to learn, but it is very challenging to master, and that's part of what makes it such an exciting game. So I'm going to assume that you don't know anything about how to play Texas Hold'em poker, though I'm sure you've likely given poker a shot at some point, just to make sure that you feel confident when you go to play at the casino. So, with that said, let's get started with our first game of Texas Hold'em poker. All right. The objective of Texas Hold'em is simply to make the best poker hand that you can. And one of the great things about Texas Hold'em is that you don't really have to make decisions about your cards, only how much you're going to bet. What's going to happen in the game is that each player will be dealt 2 cards. We'll deal 2 cards to each player at the beginning, and these are called the hole cards. These are private to each player, so you will know what your 2 hole cards are, but the other players will not. And that mystery is what helps keep things exciting. The rest of the cards in the poker hand will come from the community cards. The dealer over the course of the game will deal 5 cards onto the board, and I'll take you through the mechanics of that in just a moment. But he will deal 5 cards onto the board, we'll have some rounds of betting, and at the end, anyone who's still left playing in the showdown will reveal their cards, and whoever has the best poker hand wins the pot. Have this helpful guide of what the poker hand rankings are, and I'm going to take you through that briefly here just to orient you, and then we'll dive into how the game is played. You can hold on to this reference. It also is printed here on our table, so you have a reference for which hands are the best to help inform your bidding and your strategy. I'm just going to talk about the ordering of hands, and then we'll talk about the mechanics of the game, but I'm not going to get into strategy. I'll leave that for you to learn on your own as you work towards mastering Texas Hold'em poker. So your goal is to get the best hand possible using any combination of your hole cards and the cards on the table, the best 5 card hand, combining your hole cards in any number with cards from the community set on the board. So the lowest hand is simply high card. If you don't produce any of the other poker hand options, whoever has the highest card would win. Pair is the next lowest, simply having 2 of the same kind of any card. And in Texas Hold'em, no suit trumps any other simply on the basis of the hands, and in the event of a tie, the pot would be split equally. Up next we have two pair, so two sets of two of the same card. Then we have three of a kind, if you would say 3 sevens or 3 kings, three of a kind. In the event of ties, of course, the higher set wins. A straight, which is 5 cards in consecutive order. Could be any set of numbers, they just have to be consecutive. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 10, jack, king, queen, ace. Then we have flush, which is 5 cards of the same suit. So all 5 are clubs. Full house is 3 of one kind and 2 of another. Say 3 aces and 2 eights. Then we have 4 of a kind, 4 of any of the same card. And then we have the straight flush, which is just about the top hand, beating everything except one other hand. And a straight flush combines the straight, a consecutive run of cards, with the flush, all being of the same suit. Now, the only hand that can beat a straight flush is basically another straight flush, but specifically a royal flush. That means it is the 10, jack, queen, king, and ace, all of the same suit. The top hand in poker. Alright, so that's the ordering of hands and the hands that you'd be looking for as you make your bets. So let's get into how we play. In Texas Hold'em, the order of the betting and how cards are given out is going to be based on the player who is the dealer. Now in our case, this doesn't mean they literally deal the cards. It is a symbolic designation, and with each hand we play it will rotate to the next player in turn, but it helps us mark who is going to start the action. The dealer will actually be the one dispensing the cards, but we call this the button, and actions of the game will be referenced off of which player has the button. And as I said, that goes from one player to the next, clockwise around the table as we play each subsequent hand. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the button to our hypothetical player who is over here. And once we know who the dealer is, we identify 2 other players as well. And this is very simple. They are simply the ones to the left of the dealer, the small blind, and then to the left of the small blind is the big blind. Now there is some specific terminology in Texas Hold'em. Maybe that's confusing at first, but it is really quite simple. And to help us out, I have some additional markers we have the little blind, which I will give to this player to the left of the dealer, the player to the left of the dealer, and then I have the big blind, which goes to the player seated to the left of the little blind, going around the table counterclockwise. So let me mark that. Most games you'll probably only have the dealer button, and players will just know that the players next to them are the little blind and the big blind. So what does this mean? Well, this is just how we get the action in the game started. And when I say action here, I just mean the betting. So when we go to start a new hand, we have the dealer with the button. Next to him, the little blind. And the little blind makes the first bet of the hand. This is before any cards are received. This is a mandatory part of the game. It just gives us a basis to start the betting for our hand. Now, the table that you're playing at will define what the little blind and big blind bets are going to be. Typically, the big blind will be twice the little blind, but it really depends on the specific table and the stakes. Here in our game, we're going to have a $1 bet for the little blind and a $2 bet for the big blind. And as I said, this is mandatory. So the little blind would bet $1, and our big blind will bet $2. It's very simple. Every time we play the hand, the little blind bets the 1, and the big blind bets the 2. Just so we have some money on the table to make sure our game is interesting. After we have the little blind and the big blind, we're going to deal out 2 cards to each player. 2 cards, the whole cards. Yes, they receive the whole card, but whole as in the digging a hole out in the yard type of hole when we say whole card. So 1 to each of our players here, and a second card. So each player now has 2 cards. And at this point, you would go ahead and have a look at your cards, get a feel for how strong you think your starting hand here is, right? Remember, you will combine these cards in any combination with the community cards that we'll put here on the board. So the little blind and the big blind have made their bets. Now we have a round of betting before we deal more cards. We're going to dive into betting in a little more depth in just a bit. I will say, though it can seem complicated if you haven't played before, the only thing that happens in a round of betting is you just have to get to a point where all players have the same value bet on the table, and then we will proceed to playing the cards. So we're going to skip the specifics of betting for right now. The little blind and the big blind have put in. Other players would need to get to where we equalize all the bids, and then we will deal the first community cards. So let's do that now so you can see how the game plays out, and then we'll take a look at it with betting, okay? So before we deal cards in Texas Hold'em, we always burn a card. We take one card out of the equation and we won't know what it is. Now, the dealer will put out 3 cards. An 8 of hearts, a 7 of diamonds, and a 2 of hearts. This is called the flop. We're going to have 3 deals of community cards. First, we have the flop, where we get 3 cards. You'll start to get a sense of your hand. We'll do a round of betting. The little blind is always starting our betting. As long as they're in the game, we'll go around the table clockwise until all bets are even. Once all bets are even or players have folded, they've decided not to bet and turn in their cards and stop playing the hand. Once all our bets are equal, we're going to deal another card. Again, we burn a card, and then we play the turn. The turn is our 4th card played, and we will have another round of betting. This will be our 3rd round of betting, and I will take you through how we do that. But again, players will choose whether to match the bets, raise bets, until all bets are equal. You can see we have a 7 and an 8 and a 10 out, so could be looking at a straight. If you have a 6 or a 9, there's that potential, starting to see what's available. But once we've completed our 3rd round of betting, we will collect all the bets into the pot and we will play the last community card. Again, we burn a card and we play the final card, which in Texas Hold'em we call the river. You have the flop, the first 3 cards, a round of betting, the turn, the 4th card, and a round of betting, and finally the river. Everyone will know what hand they have at this point, and we do one final round of betting before the showdown. As before, now that we have all of our cards down, there is the last round of betting. If you're still in the game, you would look at your whole cards, see what hand you've got, and decide how strong you think that is. Make your bets accordingly. And again, if we have players left in the game who have equalized their bets, we will do the showdown, which is simply revealing the cards and thus the hands that players have. The last player to bet or raise would go first. So, we didn't really do our betting. We still have 3 players in who have their 2 whole cards. So, let's just take a look at those to kind of get a feel for making hands in Texas Hold'em. So let's reveal this player's cards. They have a 10 and a 2. 10 of spades, 2 of clubs. So, what would their hand be? There's a 2 on the board, and a 2, a 10 on the board, and a 10. So they have 2 pair. 7, 8, 9, 10, king, queen, didn't have the straight, but two pair. So that is their hand. And let's look at our next player. Alright, they have an ace and a two, two of diamonds, ace of diamonds. So while they do have a pair of twos, their high card would be an ace, there are three diamonds on the board, and they have two diamonds in their whole cards. So this player has a flush, 5 diamond cards. So a flush, currently they would be winning, beating out two pair. Let us have a look at our last player. Alright, they have a 3 of diamonds, right? They don't have the flush, right? Not enough diamonds. There are 2 hearts on the board and 1 here, so again, don't have the flush of hearts either. But let's take a look at this. 7, 8, 9, 10, queen. So if there had been a jack here, they would have had a straight, but not quite there. Their hand would simply be high card. So the player with the flush would have won this hand. You see how it works? We combine the whole cards with the community cards on the board here, and we take the absolute best that that player can make for their final hand, and the best 5-card hand from that combo is the winning hand. Alright, now let's take a look at betting. Alright, we're going to set up the same scenario that we just had, but we'll actually walk through how to bet now that you know the basic mechanics of the game. Remember the dealer button we will give to this player. The little blind is going to the player to their left. The big blind is going to the player to the small blind left. And this is going to establish who bets first in our game, because the little blind and the big blind have required bets at the start of a hand. So just like we did before, the player to the left of the dealer button has to make the little blind bet $1. And the player next to the small blind will bid $2. The blinds just help start our actions. We have bets on the table. $1 from the small blind. The big blind twice the small blind at $2. Now, we're going to deal out the whole cards to each player. We start with our small blind. First to receive cards. First to bet. A card for the big blind. We go around the table dealing to each player clockwise. We just have the 3 players right now. Second card for our small blind. Second card. Second card. All right. So our players have received their 2 hole cards. You would take a look and decide how you want to bet. And as I said earlier, betting ends when all players have the same amount staked, the same value of chips have been bet by each player, unless they've chosen to fold, which is surrendering their cards and saying they don't wish to continue betting and playing the hand. So what this means is there's going to be some different options when it comes to betting, depending on the current situation. So right now, the small blind has in $1, the big blind 2, and this player none. So the value they have bet is not equal. Thus, we're going to go around the table clockwise until we get to that point. So we'll start with this player since they have yet to bet. They could choose to fold. If they don't like these 2 whole cards, they could fold, not have to bet, and they would not participate in this hand. But let's say they would like to do so. In that case, they have 2 options. They can call, which simply means they're going to equal the value that has been bet so far. In this case, a call would be $2. This matches this player's total to the big blind. It was the last player to have bet. And this player would be all square. And now bidding comes back around to the small blind. Would have the same scenario. They either need to fold, call, match the bet, which would require $1, or they can raise. So, if this player bid to calling the big blind, it now comes to the little blind, or the small blind. They can call, add $1 to match the bet, but if they want to raise, they need to raise by the amount of the big blind. So if they felt confident about their cards, they might say they would raise, so they would get to 2, and then they would raise by 2 to make the bet 4. So now the small blind has bet 4, and the other 2 players have only bet 2, so we keep going. Let's just assume that the big blind will call, putting in another $2 to match the previous bet. And as we get back around to this player, they also choose to call. Now we've reached a point where the bids are equal and we can deal out the flop, our first 3 community cards. So we will collect the bets here. We've formed our pot. We burn a card, and then for the flop, 3 cards. Jack of spades, 5 of clubs, and 8 of spades. Now we have another round of bidding, and it works exactly the same way. However, one difference you'll note is This time, there aren't existing bets from the small blind and big blind like there were in our first round of betting. We'll start our betting, the small blind, first player left of the button who's still playing. And as before, they can bet. The minimum here would be $2, the big blind. Or they could fold. And they may also choose to check. In this case, when there are no bets placed, you can choose to check, which is just saying, I'm going to keep playing, but I'm not putting in an additional bet at this time. Now, if they check, they don't put any money in, it comes to the big blind. We're just moving around the table clockwise. And this player, because there is no bet yet, may also check. However, we're going to have them opt to make a bet. They will bet the minimum $2. Now we move around to this player, and they decide that, having seen their cards and what's been put out so far, that they would like to fold. They don't want to stake any more money on their cards, don't want to risk losing it, so they choose to fold, in which case they would give up their cards. They will be out for the rest of this hand. The money they bid in the initial round of betting, of course, would be lost to them because it's still part of the pot, which will now be played for by these two players. So this player chose to fold. And the small blind, remember they can call or raise. Check is no longer an option because there is a bet on the table. They could also fold, but we'll have them choose to call, matching the bet on the table. Now both of our remaining players have $2 in the pot. We have equalized their bets, and we can move on to the next community card. So we'll take their bets, burn a card, and we'll play the turn, the fourth community card. 5, 6, and 8. Maybe a potential straight there as you're looking at your cards. And again, we are faced with a round of betting. The small blind will kick off our betting. Again, they can choose to check, to not enter a bid. And because there's no bet, the next player to bet may also do the same. And we'll have this player opt to check as well. So both have decided to remain in, but no one has made a bet. We will close our betting there and draw the last card, the river, the fifth community card. Right. We will burn a card and then deal our final card for this hand. The Jack of Diamonds. So, on the table here, there is a pair of jacks. This might be used by players in their hand. We will have to see. Now, again, we have a round of betting. The dynamics are exactly the same as before. So let's have the small blind. Again, they will start the betting. And remember, the minimum bet would be $2, but let's say they bet 5. Now, the big blind, we have 2 players left in our game. They've made a bet. They could choose to fold if they don't want to bet. They could call and match the bet, or they could raise. So let's say they bet 5 and raise 5 for a total of 10. We come back to our player here with 5 they could call. Let's say they choose to raise again. Go 5 and raise by 10, making the total bet 20. At this point, this player will add in an additional 10, the total bet now being $20. They have equalized their bets. Each has 20 in. So we have reached the point where the betting ends. And now this would be the showdown. This was the last player to raise, or this player just called them. So we'll reveal their hand first, and we'll see what happens since I did blind betting for them. Alright, let's see what we have here. Alright, so we have a 5, 6, 7, 8, but we don't have any other color to make a straight for them. No flush available. And we see there's the pair of jacks, which this player will use, and their high card being an ace. So a pair for this player. And let's reveal our other player. So they have a 3 and a 10, 5, 6. So this player is in a similar situation, an aggressive bid for only having a pair and a 10, but like I said, we are playing blind. So they also have a pair, but this player has the ace, so their higher card wins the hand for them. And they would take all of the chips from the pot. Okay, so that is how Texas Hold'em works. Like I said, mechanics are quite simple. All you really need to do as a player is evaluate the cards you have and bet. You don't have to make any decisions about drawing. The dealer does all of that. And you just bet on what you think your hand might give you compared to the other players. Now that we've finished this hand, the button would move clockwise to the next player, as would the status of small blind and big blind. So now, in this next hand, this player would be betting the small blind $1, this player the big blind $2, and we would proceed accordingly in our next hand. So remember, we're trying to make the best 5-card poker hand using any combination of your 2 whole cards and the community cards. We get our whole cards, we bet, we make sure all bets are equal. We deal the flop, the first 3 cards. We bet again, tell everyone is equal in terms of how much they've bet. We deal the turn, the 4th card. Bet again. Deal the 5th card, the river. Complete our final round of bidding for any players still in the hand. And if we have 2 or more contesting, we'll do the showdown, where we reveal the cards and see who's produced the best 5-card poker hand. Well, that is the game of Texas Hold'em. I hope you found this helpful for how to play, and look for more how to play videos from Money-tonic Casino in the future. Have a beautiful night, and we'll see you at the gaming table.